Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate it. We have a very good one for you. Some topics that are bound to get me going. Let's just say Joe Biden sacrifices his agenda. In Punch Bowl news, Jake Sherman reveals that Biden will not be pushing anything through budget reconciliation in fiscal year 2021. Pretty much the only acceptable time where he would even have a shot at trying to get something through with even 50 plus one votes through the budget reconciliation process, like an infrastructure package. So a big cave there. But he's not alone. Bernie Sanders, days before approving humanitarian aid to Gaza, the State Department agreed to this contentious bomb sale to Israel. Bernie Sanders tried to block it, but when it went through, he put a hold on State Department nominees. He lifted that hold. Why? Who knows? Also, Israel, they are pushing their John Oliver, their very own John Oliver, out. He's on the forward to react to John Oliver's take on Israel-Palestine. And let's just say the stereotype about Jews being good at comedy does not apply to Israel, unfortunately. Finally, we'll talk about AP and their recent firing of Emily Wilder. Getting right into it today. Thank you so much for joining us. It's Newsflash. All right, so let's just go through. We're starting off with a very rare thing today with the Twitter thread. But also, I do have to say, like, coming into this, I was probably pretty much in any circle, even leading up to the Biden administration, any circle I was in, I was probably the most critical person of the Democratic Party in it. And even I was expecting a little bit more of an effort than what they are going to give here. Really just shows you how far, and really just how, like, the true nature of the Democratic Party being revealed. Let's get into it here. There's Punch Bowl news this morning. Jake Sherman writing, Senate Democrats are now unlikely to try to use their fiscal year 2021 budget resolution to put together another reconciliation package, according to three sources close to the issue. So that's pretty much September that they're going to setting that deadline to. So supposedly they're going to try again, in fiscal year 22. Right when Republicans will be ramping up their midterm campaign, and right when pretty much any political observer accepts that the only time that someone like Manchin or Sinema or even someone like Warner would even want to do something like this infrastructure package that, surprise, raises these corporate tax rates would be at least before September, preferably sometime in the summer they would get this done in a way, like if they actually wanted to do it. So, it's important here because it tells us, he writes, Jake Sherman, that it tells us a lot about the Senate's timing and also the fact that this thing is now officially dead, pretty much with the rest of Biden's agenda of any consequence. Anything get passed through the Senate at this point, because obviously, and again, the assumption is fiscal year 22 ends, Republicans will have at least the House or the Senate, possibly both. So that kind of puts things really to mean that the only chance for Biden to actually do anything would be pretty much up until September. So, and they're not going to do it. So pretty much what's happened is they've given up after, a grand total of one bill. They started strong, but they faded pretty quickly from memory. If you remember, parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough ruled that Senate Democrats can use the same budget reconciliation resolution to pass multiple majority vote reconciliation packages, according to the Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's office. Dems used the fiscal year 21 budget resolution to pass the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan in March, and they could use it again, Democrats say. But senior Democrats privately don't believe they can finish work on a second reconciliation package using the 2021 budget resolution by the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th. So, I think really it's either they don't believe or there's pretty much fact. I mean, maybe there's some of them who believe and want to do it, like maybe work for Chuck Schumer or whatever, just because they really want to see the Biden agenda succeed. But the people who make up the business end of the Democratic Party, and I mean that in who they represent, which is business, and who actually kind of has the power in the Democratic Party, which is those people, people like Mark Warner, people like Joe Manchin. Those are the people who are much more tied to business interests, and they mean business because they actually, are effective in getting the job done. Right now, what's happened is the too many Democrats, and there's been especially a lot of objections on the corporate tax rate. Too many Democrats have not been pushed to fall in line. They have a very popular president. They're in a pretty good political situation. They won quite strongly, and he is one of the more popular political figures in the country. I think maybe the most popular political figure in the country at the moment. I could be wrong about that, but at least nationwide for sure. And the Democrats are seeing an approval rating rise in Congress after the American Rescue Plan was passed. Politically, things are looking up, but these people have really, decided to get in the way. Senate Democrats instead will shift their focus to fiscal year 2020. They can use that budget resolution multiple times as well under McDonough's ruling, and they won't have to worry about the September 30th deadline. And if they can get people in to sign this bill in however many, months it is, we were 5 to 9, so 5 is almost over, so it's like more like 6, it's like 3 months. 3 months, they can't, exercise their political will, and political capital, which they do have a fair bit of on people, these holdouts like Warner, especially Warner. Warner has no business bucking Joe Biden, and the fact that he's in a deep blue state like Virginia on this, and the fact that Biden can't do it can't get the job done, speaks a lot more to Biden's capabilities and Warner's capabilities as a politician, because at least Warner knows where his bread is buttered and actually, acts that way. It also means that the debate over infrastructure could drag well into the fall, but it will put it on a collision path with the government funding and debt limit skirmishes. So there's going to be already things. That's the other side of it. So they're going to try and pass this infrastructure package in the fall with the budget reconciliation and the debt limit, which are already big things that Republicans and probably a lot of fiscally responsible Democrats, which there are a lot of in the Democratic Party that don't even get, there's more than just Manchin. They are in there in big numbers. And they will, especially come midterm time, especially if any of them are up. I'm thinking Jeanne Shaheen is one of them, I believe, but no, they are not playing around when it comes to, emphasizing their fiscal, especially after how many Republicans attack heads they're probably going to be running whatever her name is, Jeanne Shaheen, or I'm picking Jeanne Shaheen out of nowhere because I'm pretty sure she's a moderate that just doesn't get a lot of play in the news. But really, what is happening is they are they're going to run tons and tons of ads that are just this person, Jeanne Shaheen, whoever, is a tax and spend liberal, and that other than in addition in coalition with the fact that they already believe a lot of this stuff, is really, really going to make them unwilling to support a additional $1.9 trillion stimulus package on top of all the government funding debates that are sure to come up, and the debt limit the Republicans are going to be going crazy over. There is going to be a lot of pressure on the Biden, on these senators, and not a lot of it's going to be coming from the Biden administration because they just don't want it. They don't want it, and that's really, at the end of the day, what the Democrats are. The Democrats are just people who really, when it comes down to it, they are, the best way of putting it is, they're the Washington Generals, the Harlem Globetrotters. They're all playing for the same goal, go home, make money at the end of the day. But, it is our life and death situation. They are playing a game. They're playing, a facade of government that gets more like a joke every year where nothing actually gets done. Except for all the things that need to get done to maintain the status quo. Those things are done easily, and they're the ones that have the bipartisan support. At the end of the day, they are just playing for show, and don't be in that arena. Don't be someone who's watching that show being like, oh, Joe Biden, he's going to save us. Kamala's so cool. Well, no, you got to get out of there. You got to get out of the arena. You got to get out into the real world and realize that, Democrats, they don't really do anything. And yeah, they kind of doing that feels like an understatement, but we'll move on. So pretty much what's going on here today, Biden continuing to bypass Congress to get that sweet, sweet, sweet weapons money to Israel. They committed more than $5 million to rebuilding Gaza. Oh, that's so nice. That's $5 million. Wow, that's really, how about ending the blockade that can get construction materials into Gaza? Like that would be probably a bigger and better step in terms of actually making the situation better. But Israel has the right to defend itself. So who am I to question, right? So even as the administration takes steps to aid Gaza, a State Department has approved a $735 million sale of bombs to Israel just so they can, toss, $735 million bombs for Israel, bypassing congressional opposition. This is the State Department license that we all know so much about. On May 21st, according to a congressional staffer, the department granted Boeing an export license for the sale of the Joint Direct Attack Munitions and small diameter bombs, two kinds of the laser-guided munitions that were reportedly used by Israel in the 11-day attack on the Gaza Strip that ended Friday with a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. So, thank God that is over, by the way. Large swaths of territories, these bombs that we're now going to send more. Like, the idea that $5 million is some great sacrifice is just so, depressingly hilarious. This is a bombing campaign that's left swaths of territory in ruins, medical facilities, homes, roads, all that stuff destroyed by the aerial attack that killed at least 248 people this month. Together, these two developments, including the commitment of the humanitarian aid and the ongoing sale of weapons, suggest the Biden administration's policy will depart little from that of previous Democratic administrations. For decades, the U.S. has delivered millions of dollars in humanitarian relief for Palestinians and bid to stave off Palestinian uprisings that could, make things a little uncomfortable, but pretty much enabled the same bombing campaign from Israel, pretty much viewing the situation that Israel is more beneficial to have around, so beneficial to have around, in fact, that we will pay the countries that it bombs so that their starving people don't want to, grab guns and really fight. So against the backdrop of these new weapons sales, humanitarian aid, Band-Aid is a bullet on the humanitarian aid is pretty much a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, and the U.S. is paying for the Band-Aid, the bullet, and the gun, which is a great way of putting it, says Ray Jarrah, advocacy director for the human rights group Democracy for the Arab World Now. He said in an interview, humanitarian aid is important, but the United States government should stop its support for Israel's blockade and attacks on Gaza rather than subsidizing the status quo. The approval of the export license for the arms sale, which progressive legislators had tried to block at an earlier stage, immediately spurred opposition from Senator Bernie Sanders. Sanders was notified the sale had gone through and responded by placing a hold on all State Department nominees, blocking Congress from considering them from the diplomatic posts. Sanders' office told Jewish Currents, and I think he controls that with, and this is apparently the reason why he did it. He lifted this hold a few days later, and apparently it was because the administration sent over $5 million of humanitarian aid, $735 million to weapons just percent off in that very same exchange. Like, literally 147 times more money. That is how much that, Biden apparently thinks. And apparently that's how much, Bernie's principle on this issue is worth. Is really kind of depressing to see. While Sanders strongly supports Biden's steps to aid Gaza, according to his office, he also conveyed to the administration that simply returning to the pre-war status quo was insufficient. But you let them do it. You lifted the literal only piece of leverage that you had of the situation was State Department nominees, blocking Congress from considering them for diplomatic posts, which I believe he can do in his committee ship. I'm not entirely sure how he can do that, but the point is he can do that, and he's not doing it anymore. The only the littlest tiniest thorn in the side of the Democratic Party, Bernie is unwilling to do it. He's immediately says, "Okay, that's great, because of the $5 million of humanitarian aid for an 11-day bombing campaign that killed what was it, 70, 80 children, 240 people, 240 civilians, at least 248 people this month. So that's the total thing. So But yeah, all these civilian targets that have been bombed, all the atrocities that happened just over the last 11 days in Gaza. And all that it takes for Bernie Sanders on this issue is a commitment of $5 million of humanitarian aid. At the same time, Biden sends 147 times more to Israel for more weapons to do the same thing over again when they want to mow the grass in, a few years or whatever the next time it starts to grow a little high is again. So that is where they are right now, and it is really, really depressing to say. So it doesn't look like, at least from Bernie's, there's going to be actually any substantive resistance on Israel from this. Hopefully, the squad could do a little bit better, but it is something really, really depressing. Bad move from Bernie Sanders here. All right, we'll take a look at what Israel's John Oliver has to say in a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, and let me tell you about our lineup. Newsflash is all new Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays now, and that is, of course, our flagship show, but we have plenty of other great offerings for you, including Uncultured live mixes every Saturday. Perfect way to celebrate or get ready for the Saturday night. Have a good time. Tune in to the Spencer Walsh Radio Network for live broadcasts. And Hidden History is every Thursday now on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. We got a banger new episode coming for you around midday or so tomorrow. So you have that to look forward to. Please support us. Listen to our podcast wherever. But when you do, please be sure to rate and review us, because that does help get the word out there. I'm sure you know the drill if you listen to podcasts. You know what to do. It's the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. Thanks so much for listening. All right, so we have a very interesting clip here for you today. We're not going to go through it all. It's about 9 minutes, so let's just roll. This is Israeli comic Lior Shailin does a point-by-point rebuttal of John Oliver's viral video about the Israel-Palestine conflict. Let's go into it.
John Oliver's latest monologue, because Israel being attacked and hurt and humiliated by Hamas, the Palestinian terrorist organization from Gaza, was not enough.
Again, yeah, just first off the bat, he's Israeli. I'm not going to be so surprised here. This is not like a no surprise, but obviously clearly just adopting the Israeli territory. The idea that, being quote unquote humiliated by having to go from your brunch to your bomb shelter for a few minutes while people are, in Gaza are experiencing 100 times worse I'm sorry, not a good argument. Just not.
In Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, Palestinians are essentially being governed by a form of apartheid. These expulsions would violate Israel's obligations under international law. Life in Gaza is hard even when they are not being bombed. Destroying a civilian residence sure seems like a war crime. You should probably never meme a war crime. Committing a fucking war crime.
Sticks and stones may break my bones. Okay, sticks and stones and rockets and missiles and a mortar barrage may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. For 10 days now, Israel is being bombarded. Sirens are running nonstop. Children are running, crying to find shelter.
Does anybody actually believe this? Does anyone see this and say, damn, Israel's really under attack? They're, experiencing, rocket fire that poses little to no threat to them by their own admission. When they're talking to their people, they're like, the IDF's so strong. We just saved 90% of rockets. Single-digit Israelis were killed as opposed to hundreds of Palestinians. Again, 100% necessary caveats here. That is all bad. We don't want to see it. But the idea that completely erasing the other side, which is a clearly much more severe damage, is just, it's so morally dishonest, ethically, just vacuous and vacant. But I mean, I really have a hard time that anyone with two eyes and ears and a brain in their head has any how do they believe that?
In the cities of Ashkelon and Jerusalem and Beersheba and Tel Aviv and all over the place, civilians are getting hit. Some are getting killed. So we can take another hit from John Oliver.
We're getting John Oliver. He's making me feel unsafe. Oh, like really this guy, like he should leave comedy and start like doing dramatic acting.
Accusing Israel with breaking international law and committing.
Not just him. The Human Rights Watch, like the UN, all this stuff. It is in there. People have tried to get him Israel in the past in the UN, but the U.S. always stands in the way.
War crimes, and did I forget anything?
Killing civilians and children.
Yeah, but again, this is the thing. This is their best defense. This is their big killing civilians defense. Oh, but they were Hamas. But that is the thing. I guess, to be fair, Israel, they can't kill anyone in Gaza as a civilian because they're just going to make the case that every single person in Gaza is a Hamas operative, because that is literally how they view them. That is how a majority of people in Israel, definitely the top people in the military and the government, view every citizen in Gaza as Hamas terror agents who can strike at any moment. And the fact that they get on top of a building that Israel's about to bomb because, I don't know, it's their freaking house, and they still bomb it anyway. Yeah, you're still killing civilians. I'm not going to let you off the hook for that one. Like, that is the human shield defense that is just slimy and disgusting, just because of the fact that it's so, again, just like the other thing, clearly, like, if you do the slightest skim of research, it falls apart. But everyone's saying it, so why would you dig into it? Plus, again, you don't want to be called anti-Semitic.
Children have been killed this week. 8 in a single strike just yesterday. The only scenario in which the answer to is killing children wrong gets tricky is if you're a time traveller in 1890s Austria trying to explain why you just killed the Hitler family's bouncing new baby boy.
Is that the only scenario in which killing a child is okay? I mean, if a child sits behind me on a plane and I'm not allowed to, because I'm an Israeli, and I thought, seriously, John, life in Gaza is...
I don't know where he was going with that. Like, it seemed very weird. It's like, what's he gonna... Is it because he's an Israeli? He, like, John expects him to kill civilians, and he thinks he's like, you just portrayed me as some brutal savage, or was he actually, going to joke about it? I mean, either way, kind of unclear. I couldn't really quite interpret that, so I'm just going to leave it be.
It's hard because Israel is murdering Palestinian children. Honestly, you don't paint an accurate picture. And not being able to paint an accurate picture is what led us to the Middle East conflict to begin with. And another World War II reference is coming up in 20 seconds.
The US government has implicitly co-signed on the brutally hard line Israel's been taking. And the US is heavily implicated here. True. Not just by serving as Israel's diplomatic shield at the UN, but by constantly refusing to criticize the indefensible. Israel has a right to defend itself is just something all presidents end up saying out loud at some point in office for decades. The backbone of America's policy in the Middle East has been that America is an unwavering friend to Israel, which is a great thing to try and be. But at the end of the day, I would hope that a real friend would tell me when I'm being an arsehole.
In an interesting twist on history, a Brit is asking an American president to change his policy towards my people. Well, last time it took Japanese kamikaze to do that.
Oh, yeah, he has this, like, weird, like, obsession where he keeps bringing up Churchill. And, like, as the great Winston Churchill once said, like, I don't know exactly what, like, in the World War II reference, he's saying the last time it took...
towards my people. Well, last time it took Japanese kamikaze to do that.
Okay.
A Brit is asking an American president to change his policy towards my people. Well, last time it took Japanese kamikaze to do that. On the other hand...
Oh, he's referring to FDR getting involved in World War II. I see. Okay.
And John Oliver's simplistic, self-righteous, one-sided monologue really is trending on YouTube.
Look, if you believe Israel's actions are warranted and proportionate this week, you're welcome to try and make that argument.
Well, since you asked...
You're welcome to try and make that argument. But we have got to start having this conversation honestly.
Honestly? Of course, honestly. And by honestly, you mean...
Falling back on convenient, sanitized terms like real estate disputes and airstrikes on militants feels a little disingenuous. Sanitized terms like evictions or property disputes rankle those who live there. The use of the phrase tit-for-tat war in a conflict where you just pointed out one side has suffered over 10 times the casualties. Something which speaks to both the severe power imbalance at play here and how that often gets obscured by how we choose to talk about it. Israeli civilians were killed this week, which is terrible. But the point is, this isn't tit for tat.
Yeah, that's the point. The terminology and the symmetry.
Yes, it is the point because you keep making it the point every single time. Like, the idea that the Israeli government does not use, like, ridiculous terminology in their propaganda is, like, hilarious. And the idea that, oh, we should really care. This is the essential point that this guy's making here, is that you should forget everything that you know about, like, moral justice and, you know, information that's clearly right in front of your eyes about what's happening in Palestine and the fact that it is such a clearly disproportionate, quote-unquote, conflict. They're being occupied, they're being oppressed in the West Bank, Israel, and Gaza, moving into all these territories and, you know, blockading Gaza. You're not even allowed to go farther than, you know, a certain point outside to fish or you get shot. Like, it is an absolute... like, it's just so incredibly, like, flat to come in and make this argument at this point.
Israelis don't die enough. We'll keep trying. How many Israelis?
The idea is that no Israeli, like, this is just what an absolutely, like, crazy way to, like, twist this. This is like, you know, you're arguing with the guy in, like, the abusive, like, that's it, right? You want to kill me. That's what it is. Like, just the you know, narcissism disorder for the whole country here is like the pick me nature. I don't even know what to call it. It's like, yeah, that's right. You want us all to die. I know that. I understand. You want to kill us. You want to kill the Jews. Just like, no. Like, we don't want you to, you know, occupy Palestine. We want you to give them, like, their land back. You know, like, that's it. We don't want anything to happen to you. Just like, we want you to undo the bad crimes that you did, and, you know, make it right. We don't, like, the idea he's calling for, like, again, anybody who looks at this with 2 eyes, ears, and a brain in their head is not going to think that John Oliver is, like, wants more Jews to die or Israelis.
Casualties will satisfy you. A child, do you count it as less than one? It's a war. And as the great Churchill once said, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and symmetry. And let's say that the tit-for-tat war means...
I think he tried to deliver that as a joke. Like, there was, like, something joke, like, it's okay, you know, a war is, like, how important, it's, like, the symmetry is important in a war. That's the point he was trying to make. But, like, you know, the first time I watched this, it went over my head, I have to say. So that is that's certainly one. I'm kind of having fun doing this. But the idea of calling it not calling it a tit for tat war is because it completely, like, it builds up the role of Palestine and the position that Palestine is in to a ridiculous amount to make Israel's crimes look less bad. And that is what we are, like, fighting against. It's not about, oh, we gotta, like, make out the exact number of casualties. The important thing, the casualties are evidence to show the fact that there is a gross power imbalance between Israel and Palestine. Israel, of course, being the more powerful by far. And that the fact that that is not acknowledged, and it's just like, so it's like he's looking everywhere but the thing that's kind of like right in front of his face.
Same number of casualties, which it doesn't exactly, by the way, but still, what's your point?
There is a massive imbalance when it comes to the two sides' weaponry and capabilities. While most of the rockets aimed toward Israeli citizens this week were intercepted, Israel's airstrikes were not. They hit their targets. The fact is, the citizens of Gaza don't have an Iron Dome to protect them the way that the citizens of Israel do. It's one of the many ways they're at a significant disadvantage. Both sides are firing rockets, but one side has one of the most advanced militaries in the world. Both sides are suffering heartbreaking casualties, but one side is suffering them exponentially.
Both sides.
And then again, one is under an occupation where they have, like, limited access to things as basic as electricity and water. So that's something you should probably factor in too.
sides love eating hummus, but one side is a terrorist organization deliberately targeting Israeli civilians.
And then one side is a terrorist organization bombing hospitals and refugee camps. Sorry, I should say roads to hospitals and schools and AP press buildings. Like the idea, like if you want to call Hamas a terrorist group, you have no standing not to call the IDF the exact same thing. All right, we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about the AP. So the Associated Press has received an enormous amount of criticism as of late, including from its own staffers, for firing Emily Wilder, 22-year-old, who's just hired as a news associate 17 days before. This again in The Intercept here. And I do apologize. Sometimes I forget about the sources. Jake Sherman for our first story, Jewish Currents about the Bernie story, and of course that the forward video for our last story. According to AP, Wilder was let go for violations of the AP social media policy. AP's actions were clearly in response to a right-wing pressure campaign targeting Wilder for her activism in college supporting Palestinian rights. And again, when they gave her a reason for this, by the way, John Schwartz in The Intercept, great journalist, is who we're reading from here. But when we have this, like firing, normally at least, it is a time to say, first of all, that, this is actually, cancel culture. And second of all, you gotta at least tell the person what they've been canceled for. But they didn't even do that. It's like, what social media, what post was it that was so bad? And they would not even tell her. They wouldn't. Little appalling. None of this really should be that much of a surprise. AP has been notably conservative since its founding in 1846, with a long history of bowing to demands of the powerful, with its many talented journalists often forced to fight its management to get the news out. While other wire services such as the UPI and Reuters have not always covered themselves in glory, AP's history demonstrates significantly more bias. AP has been long one of the most important news organizations in the world. It's a non-profit cooperative with about 1,000 member papers. It produces 2,000 stories per day, with its reporting often the main or only coverage of many stories. According to AP itself, over half the world's population regularly sees its work. Mahatma Gandhi once joked, "When I go to the hereafter and stand at the Golden Gate, the first person I shall meet will be a correspondent of the Associated Press." They're everywhere. That's why it's so crucial to understand the AP's perspective. It's regularly baked into its DNA. It was created by Moses Yale Beach, the publisher of the New York Sun, who arranged for 5 New York newspapers, including the Sun, to share the cost of covering the Mexican-American War. In retrospect, the war was a straight-up theft of Mexican territory, including all of California, by the U.S., but it was justified by shameless deceit by President James K. Polk, as both Presidents Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses Grant accurately said. Yet it was covered by the AP as a fulfillment of America's manifest destiny, reflecting Beach's fervent belief the United States should seize as much territory as possible. And as we saw in the kind of Civil War world, I guess, when the frontier closed, a lot of that came to post-World War II. World, it just pretty much came time to expand America's influence in other ways, and a lot of those ways were, through imperialism, kind of the wars abroad that we know and have talked so much about. The general point of view of kind of quote unquote media objectivity, continued with AP's coverage of the wars between indigenous people and the federal government after the U.S. Civil War. When AP correspondent Mark Kellogg left to cover the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, his final dispatch read, "By the time this reaches you, we would have met and fought the Red Devils. With what remains to be seen, I go with Custer, and will be there at the death." The phrase "at the death" did not mean that Kellogg expected that he and Custer would die. On the contrary, it's language borrowed from fox hunting that means being present when the animals are run to the ground and killed. Instead, to Kellogg's surprise, both he and Custer ended up actually dying. As union organizing and worker revolts burgeoned in the early 1900s, the AP became notorious among progressives for its reactionary coverage. After a huge 1913 worker strike in West Virginia, the socialist magazine The Masses pointed out the AP's local representative was a member of a military tribunal judging the strikes. This was accompanied by a cartoon depicting the AP's president dripping poison into a reservoir, labeled the news, filling it with, quote, lies, quote, suppressed facts, and, quote, slander. So it's kind of just a brief history of the AP and why you should really evaluate your perspective when you see the AP label on a story. That's all we got for you guys today. We'll be back with Hidden History tomorrow. Thanks for listening.